Stop letting vacations wreck your wallet.
We've got 4 moves to help you travel for less.
Hi, I'm Celine, and I'm here with my friend Sobair, and we're here to talk about 4 tips that you can use to enjoy your vacation without stressing about money.
Hey, I'm Sobair. The first tip we're going to talk about today is budgeting for a trip.
Budgeting, that's an important one. Everybody knows where they want to go, but they don't always know all the costs that are associated with it. Sobair, tell us a little bit about how you budget for your trips.
I often like to think about the destination that I'm going to, and I do like to use apps where you can input the airport from and then to, and it even shows you a calendar of the best airfare for that specific day, because sometimes you don't even realize that one day could be significantly cheaper than the other.
It's always stressful though. Sometimes you don't know if you got the best deal. What I like to use on those is the alerts, so it'll actually tell me if my flight has gone down or up for certain days, so I can monitor it over a few days and then decide when's the best time to purchase.
Not only considering the flight that can, be pricey, expensive, sometimes like the hotel and the food, depending on where you're traveling to as well at the same time. So I think it's both things that you should be considering is how much is the flight, but also how much is it when I get there.
What I like to do is divide my budget into 2 pieces. The first one is what are the things I need to have. I know I'm gonna need to get there, and I know I'm gonna need to have a place to stay, but then what are the other things that would be nice to have? And how do I budget for that? So figuring out how much does each thing cost? Am I gonna get the most value from that? Or should I maybe trade that activity out for another activity that's cheaper, but I'm still getting the experience of being in that new place?
Because I think we always think about the biggest items that we're paying for, right? We always think about the flight, the hotel, and the food, and sometimes we could forget about the miscellaneous things, the miscellaneous expenses, whether it's a guided tour, souvenirs, or any other items that we're going to purchase, because that can add up.
All those slices of pizza in Italy, you need to account for those.
And that's why I think it's important to do your research, right? So that you can ensure that you're setting the right budget when it comes to food to get that pizza.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest things with that is once you have that budget set, make sure you stick to it.
Right.
It can be easy to overspend when you're having fun on vacation, but if you have that budget beforehand, you know exactly what you need to do to make sure you're not overspending.
Especially like if you're shopping and you're looking at souvenirs, I think sometimes we see that bright, shiny thing and like we forget about that budget. So I think it's definitely important to stay within your budget.
Absolutely.
I think it's also really important to budget for emergencies, things that may come up that's not expected.
I actually have a really funny story about that. Once when I went to go see the Niagara Falls in New York, I decided to cross the bridge to go over to Canada. And guess what? I didn't plan accordingly and I got stuck in Canada. I needed Canadian cash to get back, and that made me overspend by about $100 just to be able to get back into the US.
That's funny, Celine, because that's a great segue into tip number 2, which you should be considering the cost of living and the exchange rate whenever you're traveling, because it can differ from city to city.
No, absolutely. I think one of the biggest mistakes I make that I have to remind myself is if I travel internationally, it's not always 1 for 1. For example, $1 does not always equal €1. A lot of times I'm over there traveling and I'm buying something and I say, oh, it's 10 euros, and I assume it's $10, when really that's $14 or $15 depending on the time. So you have to be careful.
Definitely something to consider, even locally, right? Traveling within the US, I think comparing places like Orlando to like New York and Los Angeles, where it's a higher cost of living there, so like the hotels and the food items are going to be a lot more expensive compared to what you're used to.
Yeah, absolutely. So doing that research beforehand can make sure that you budget the right way so that when you get there, there's no sticker shock and you know exactly what you're paying. And Sobair, talking about that exchange rate, I mentioned how 10 euros could equal $14, $15. You can actually research what are some countries where the dollar would work in your favor. That exchange rate could help you and you actually spend less on the things that you would spend at home.
Celine, now that we've talked about how much things cost, let's talk about activities and things to do when you do get to your destination.
There are so many different options if you research that are completely free, that you can really get the culture feel and really understand what that country or that state is like without having to break the bank.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Like a great example of that is, going to a destination like New York, right? Where you can cross the Brooklyn Bridge, go to Times Square, Central Park. All of that is amazing scenery, and you're taking the culture and the atmosphere of New York, but it's free.
Look at some of those seasonal activities as well. For example, when I went to Paris, it was during the holidays, and we made it a mission to go to all the Christmas markets, and they were completely free to walk around, but it's something that you don't really get at home.
Yeah.
So I really felt like I was still traveling, but I didn't have to spend money on it, which is even better.
Nice.
And that brings us to our fourth tip, which is save in small ways. So, Bear, how do you do that when you're traveling?
I think transportation's a big one for me because when you're, traveling to places like New York, for example, there's so much public transportation, right? There's trains, there's buses. I do personally like to use AI platforms because it kind of tells you like different trains and buses to take and utilize. Because sometimes when you're traveling to a different city that you're not familiar with, it can be a little scary because you're not familiar with the city or public transportation maybe. And that's very, different for some people depending on where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect way to save. And I know a lot of times we talk about, is it cheaper to rent a car than to go on all the guided tours as well?
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Like sometimes it is, right? I think we both went to Iceland and we both found that it was far cheaper to actually rent a car and travel all through and drive versus a guided tour where each of us is paying a bigger dollar amount. It could be multiple of us in the car.
Absolutely. And it's really a win-win in my books because not only are you saving more money, but then you also get to enjoy as much time as you want at each of those locations.
Yeah, you're not rushed. You can kind of explore. You can walk around.
It's a win-win. So, Bear, another way that I found that you can save in small ways is by hitting up those local grocery stores. One, it's a fabulous experience to see how they shop and what are some of the food items that they have that we don't have back home. But second, you can save so much money. You can buy it from the grocery store and then you can bring it with you. You can either cook from the hotel if you have a kitchen, or you have extra snacks or pre-made sandwiches. All of that will make it less money that you are spending than going to a restaurant, let's say, or one of the tourist areas. They always have overpriced food and drinks. That's one way to save too.
I absolutely agree. I think you sometimes get caught up at the convenience stores in those tourist areas, and it's a lot more expensive and pricier versus, like you mentioned, going to the grocery store.
Absolutely. They know what they're doing.
It's important to plan far out because things can be cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely. And the further out that you are able to plan, that gives you more time to budget, to do some research, and make sure that you don't overspend. These are our 4 tips on budgeting smarter when traveling. Do you have any other tips?
Drop a comment, like, and subscribe.